Hello there, I'm oNE Fitz and welcome back to the Fitz podcast as we look back at the Japanese Grand Prix. And so strange to have the Japanese Grand Prix in April where normally that race is on in October. We thought maybe we might have some interruption with the rain this weekend, but we only had some rain in practice. It was a dry and cold qualifying and race, but slightly warmer temperatures on a race weekend, which saw Red Bull bounce back from its disappointment of the retirement of Max in Australia and Perez not getting on the podium. It was a 1-2 for the all-dominant Red Bull, and interesting enough, Red Bull with a brand new car actually, and an update for this weekend, which could have seen them possibly, you know, win the race by a larger margin or not with the old car. Who knows? They weren't really tested this weekend. We thought maybe Ferrari might be a small test towards Red Bull, but they're only fighting with themselves. So when it came to qualifying, good lap for Max Verstappen. He wasn't fully happy with the lap he'd put together, and his teammate Sergio Perez qualified in second with Lando Norris. Very impressive and very good pace in that McLaren for third place to start on the grid. But it was a race that ended with a 1-2. Max Verstappen wins again, just ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. So Max doing what Max does best, and Sergio Perez really with a good consistent year so far, bar, you know, a bit of a blip in Australia, which wasn't a great race for Red Bull. We see Sergio Perez second, and he really needs, I think, to start putting a bit of pressure under Max. Maybe pick up a win at the odd race, maybe pick up a win if Max has a few problems, and not leave it to Carlos Sainz and then George Russell to crash. It was Carlos Sainz who finished then in third place. So just take a look at Red Bull first this weekend, and Red Bull were just dominant. Red Bull were just in a comfortable position. They brought new upgrades to the car, more downforce on the car, and it just goes to say the work that's been done by people back at the headquarters in Milton Keynes for Red Bull, and of course the designer Adrian Newey. And look, there's always speculation that Adrian Newey is going to go to Aston Martin or he's going to go to Ferrari and follow Lewis Hamilton. I say that man gets offered a job and money every day, but his designs and his team, it all works together, and it's just an amazing Red Bull. And we're going to see this in 24, we're going to see this in 25 as well. And you know, what can Red Bull bring to new regulations in 2026, teaming up with Ford? And you kind of hope that they're going to hold on to Adrian Newey. Why would he want to leave? Does he want the challenge? But then again, he probably likes the lifestyle he has and the flexibility that Red Bull as a brand and Red Bull as a company give him as well. I'm sure he's happy out, and to see the all-dominant car, and he's made some amazing cars and McLarens and Williams in the past. Sergio Perez, second place. Another solid weekend for Sergio Perez. You know, if Max is winning, he needs to come second. It's as simple as that. And as I said, if Max isn't winning, he needs to start winning. So, you know, earlier on last year, we did see Sergio get some wins. And then when he got caught up by Max in Miami, he just seemed to lose all motivation and all ability in the car for the rest of the season. So I think we need to see Perez that bit closer in the race. It was close in qualifying. Max wasn't ultimately happy with his lap, but we see Perez, you know, not far behind. So look, if he can do a bit of a Rosberg on it, where he's not that far behind, like he shouldn't be finishing 10-15 seconds off the pace. He should be second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds behind him. But it just goes to show how good Max Verstappen is, bouncing back after a disappointing weekend in Australia. And he just goes to show that he can just put the lap together and he can maintain his tyres. You know, there was a bit of worry maybe how the tyres would go this weekend. The high deg, sometimes not as good against the Ferrari this year. But look, it all went great for Red Bull as they get a 1-2. Carlos Sainz, third. He didn't have a great qualifying. He wasn't too happy with qualifying, but he ends up third. He's the only driver to be on the podium every race he's competed in. Of course, he did miss one race in Jeddah this year because he was getting his appendix out, came back in Australia and won himself a race. So Carlos Sainz is really kind of showing he's the leader so far in this championship for Ferrari, isn't he? He's got the win, he's got more podiums than Charles, and he's out of a job with Ferrari for Lewis Hamilton in 2025. But look, we can talk about where Carlos Sainz is going later in the season. Who finished in fourth place? Charles Leclerc finished in fourth place. He was the driver of the day. Disappointing qualifying. He said he tried everything with the car and he just couldn't really get the pace out of it. But when it came to the race, good strategy from Ferrari. He was looking like he was going to get a podium, but obviously Carlos Sainz had better tyres and better pace than him. So Charles would be, wouldn't say happy, but to be slightly some bit happy to finish fourth place after a really disappointing qualifying. But Ferrari just not on it this weekend. In qualifying, the McLaren was even faster. So look, it didn't really suit them this weekend, but I think heading into China, a lot of fast straights in China that is going to suit the Red Bull. So, but I think we'll see Ferrari that bit closer as the Chinese Grand Prix comes back. In 5th place, Lando Norris, very disappointed, not happy with his strategy. To finish in 5th place for Lando Norris, who was looking for a podium, and maybe he was hoping that he could catch Perez, but he ended up finishing in 5th place, not happy with his strategy. Alonso, I don't know if this is mind games or if Alonso's lost his mind or he's genuinely happy, but he says this is one of the best weekends he's ever had. And this man has finished second on the podium last year. But he's really happy with 6th place. They don't really have the car, and we've seen his teammate Lance Stroll really struggling. But Alonso seems to be really happy with 6th place. I think he got the best out of the car, and he seems to be quite happy in 6th place. I think Lance Stroll was really struggling for pace. There's a great audio message where he's going, it feels like I'm in a different category, I can't keep up with these cars. Just reminds us of Alonso in the black McLaren going, GP2 engine, GP2. Disappointing for Lance Stroll just to finish outside the points in 11th, but Fernando Alonso is very happy with his 6th place. Is he staying there next year? Will he be going to Mercedes? Could we see him at Red Bull? I don't think so. Possibly Mercedes, or he might stick another year at Aston Martin. There was an interesting quote. He'd go, why would I want to go to Mercedes when they're behind us? And that is true, and that leads us on to Mercedes. George Russell in 7th, Piastri in 8th, and Lewis Hamilton in 9th. Piastri not on form this weekend, maybe too much cake. It was his birthday, but Piastri seems to slightly struggle, I find, in Japan. He struggled last year. I know he was a rookie last year. He struggled a lot with his tyres last year, so it'll be very interesting to see how Piastri bounces back in China. Not the best weekend for him, but look, some points in 8, and Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Wow. Toto Wolff decided to cancel some of his skiing holidays because he needed to be with his team, and they're struggling. And they're not going anywhere up the grid anytime soon, and probably not next year as well. New car, new design this year, and they haven't seemed to have grasped the new regulations, and they have in the past before. Lewis Hamilton, in an interview before the race with Ted Kravitz from Sky Sports, he did say, yes, they haven't grasped it yet, but after this weekend, I think Lewis Hamilton will be very disappointed. He even give way for George Russell. I mean, how many times do we see Lewis Hamilton let a teammate go past? Normally, it's the other way around. He doesn't look motivated. He's not going to be in a lot more meetings. He's not going to be a part of the development of the car going forward for 2025. So I feel Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes are done, and I feel it's hurting their relationship as well, more importantly. Like, look, he's got a good relationship. He's still be friends with Toto Wolff, kind of like Valtteri Bottas is, but you can see that, you can see it already, that the attention's moving over to George, the attention's moving to the future. But look, it's going to happen when you leave a team, but the fact that he had to announce that he was leaving before the start of the season, I think it's going to be a long season for Lewis Hamilton. Look, he'll get the most out of a car. Lewis will do the best he can, but if they're not giving him the tools, they're not giving him the data, they're holding back on stuff, the team probably aren't going to be that motivated towards Lewis Hamilton. We will see him struggle, but Mercedes in an awful place. Where do they go for the second seat? Do they need experience in the car? Do they go for a youngster? Some interesting times ahead for Mercedes, but it is not going very good. Lewis Hamilton 9th in Japan. That is something we don't really hear very often. It's a driver circuit, and I kind of find the great drivers tend to do great in there. Yuki Tsunoda, his home race, 10th place for his team, for the Racing Bulls. He'll be absolutely delighted with that, and he had to fight to get himself into the points and to get himself that point as well. Absolutely love the racing, don't they? And they just love dressing up, and some of the DRS hats and just some of the stuff I saw over the weekend. They're insane when it comes to Formula 1. They're such big fans and big support for Yuki. Busy weekend for him, and they'll be delighted. The team actually even celebrated out in the garage like they won. I thought it was a bit too much, but then again, for the Japanese fans who've been there and supporting all weekend, they're amazing fans. We say we've great fans at Silverstone, and we've great fans, the Dutch army that follow Max Verstappen, but the Japanese really love their Formula 1, really greatly attended Grand Prix, and China should be as well, a sellout the following weekend. So great support for Yuki Tsunoda, and good for him to finish in 10th. Let's talk about his teammate while we're talking on the Visa Cash App. Red Bull Racing, Red Bulls, whatever they want to call themselves. Disappointing, wasn't it? Ricciardo's under a lot of pressure. Driving incident, yes. Himself and Albon. I don't think anyone was really to blame. Albon was always going to go for the outside. Ricciardo was always kind of follow the racing line. It's just disappointing because it was a result that, number one, Williams didn't need another crash car, and Ricciardo needed to possibly get in the points or be fighting in the points to show that he should be in that car next year. So still more struggles for Daniel Ricciardo in the Visa Cash App Racing Bulls car. His teammate will be delighted in 10th. Yuki really showing he's a team leader. What does it mean for Ricciardo? Every time he makes a mistake, they go and show Lawson on the television. Is it a bit too much? Is he under pressure? Is he going to be given an ultimatum of, halfway through the season, Daniel, if you don't improve? It just looks like he's lost his spark, but what could he do when he had a crash? Incidents do happen in Formula 1, and he just feels sorry for Daniel Ricciardo. Something that he didn't need, but he'd have to bounce back in China. He needs to start being close or beating Yuki Tsunoda. 11th place went to Nico Hülkenberg. You know what? For a car that wouldn't suit the circuit, and the team principal came out and he said, the car really isn't suited here. The fact that we got an 11th place and Magnussen in 13th, we're really happy. So they're happy, and they think that China, they might have more of a chance to score points. Haas have done very well to score points at the start of the season. They didn't think they'd have a competitive car this year, a lot more comfortable on the tyres than they did last year. So really good performance. I think Nico Hülkenberg was really honest this weekend. Had a bad start, didn't he, on the restart after the red flag, after the crash between Albon and Ricciardo. He got a really bad start, and he was on some old soft tyres as well. So I think the strategy really didn't work for him, and then they tried to make it work. So they'll be happy in a way, but not happy, but they can see potential in the car. So well done to Haas, 11th, and Kevin Magnussen in 13th. Not much of a great weekend for Kevin Magnussen. Lance Stroll struggled all weekend, didn't he? He's never got out of Q1 in Japan. Circuit doesn't seem to suit him, and he was struggling compared to his teammate, which finished in 6th place. That's 12th for Lance Stroll. Kevin Magnussen 13th. Bottas had a really good qualifying, didn't he? He did well in qualifying, but the race just didn't work out for him. Slightly better on the pit stops, a 4-point-something second pit stop, which is slow for Sauber, but better compared to the last weekends they had. But 14th place, and then we've got the two Alpines. What can we say? 15th and 16th. There was a few kind of incidents, really, wasn't there, with the Alpines and with Lewis Hamilton as well, who might have had a bit of damage on his car in the first stint. But Alpine, what can we say? Not much more compared to last weekend. It's going to be later on into the season until they can develop something, but they're really struggling, and it's sad to see them down in 15th and 16th place. But to be honest with you, the way that team seems to be run, and the way they're cutting in people in and out, we're not surprised that Alpine are where they are. And I just think the Renault, the Alpine brand, is it going to be sold? Renault hasn't come back and done anything super fantastic in Formula 1, so it'll be interesting to see what happened with that one. Logan Sargent in 17th, he did go off, but he did manage to come back on the racing circuit with maybe 2 or 3 laps to go. Lucky he didn't bin the car. He's got Albon's crashed car from last weekend, so he got his own car taken off him because Albon crashed. And then this weekend we saw more crashes. He had a big crash himself in practice, something the team didn't need. And then on Sunday they didn't need Albon to crash, and Albon had that incident with Ricciardo. More work for the Williams team, who don't really seem to have enough parts, and it seems they won't have enough chassis and spare parts until Miami. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with that car at the Chinese Grand Prix. But Alex Albon's car didn't look like he might have chassis damage. He might get away with that one, but I said the Williams mechanics are just absolutely wrecked tired. They must be sick of fixing crash cars, and I would say the next race in China they'll be told, lads, we'd rather drive around slow and not score points than bin it. Nah, I don't think so. It's Formula 1. James Vowles loves his racing and he loves his drivers. I think he'll be trying to motivate them, but struggles for Logan Sargent, and even to be in that car as well. Zhou Guanyu in 18th place. It's his first home Grand Prix. Of course, he hasn't been in China, obviously due to COVID, so he hasn't raced at his home Grand Prix. His home Grand Prix he's going to be racing. He did not finish in 18th. Daniel Ricciardo in 19th and Alex Albon in 20th. He'll be disappointed after the crash in Australia and to crash out with that incident with Daniel Ricciardo. So it's the Red Bulls that lead the way in the drivers and the constructors championship, and look, it'll be another strong weekend I think for Max Verstappen and Perez. Hopefully Perez can maybe give it to Max Verstappen. We might see some Ferrari action as well. Charles Leclerc will be looking to bounce back after disappointing qualifying to beat Carlos Sainz, and we'll have the Mercedes as well who'll be looking for a strong weekend, and the Alpines that are struggling as well, they'll be looking for a better weekend. But I don't see much change heading in to the Chinese Grand Prix. Thank you so much for joining as we take a look back at the Japanese Grand Prix. And if you ever want to be on the podcast, slide into the DMs, leave a comment if you ever want to talk Formula 1, and hope you love the lovely new studio we have here for the podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again after the Chinese Grand Prix interaction. It is Max Verstappen that leads the way.